Chapter 17. Sawyer and Julius didn't return to the house until late morning. They opened the door to another flurry of activity. Everyone was preparing for what was supposed to have been one of the happiest nights of her life. Minnie Fay had come to help in the preparation, and Sawyer's breaking heart wanted none of it. Luna came rushing up to her, panicked. "Where have you been? I've been looking for you everywhere," she exclaimed, and grabbed Sawyer's arm, trying to pull her in the direction of the ballroom. "Come, we have much to do." Sawyer yanked her arm free from Luna's grasp and said no. Luna was shocked and confused. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean, no. I'm not helping with anything, and I will be wearing a black dress tonight, not a special Fay one. When I come to sing, I will be mourning the loss of my love." That's when Luna noticed Sawyer's puffy eyes and realized the girl had been crying for hours probably. "Sweet Sawyer, I know you are suffering right now, but tonight is going to be the happiest night of your life," Luna said, trying to be positive for the girl. "The only way that will happen is if Julius is my soulmate. If he isn't, then it will be the saddest night of my life," she answered miserably. "It is your fate, though," Luna said sadly. "I will accept my fate tonight, Luna, and I will sing. But until that moment, I want to spend my last hours alone with Julius. I will not be moved in that decision," she said. "As you wish, Sawyer, but I promise you that when you are connected with your soulmate tonight, all sadness will leave your heart," Luna told her, trying to comfort her. "You can't possibly know that, Luna. No one has ever had a soul sting like mine before, and none of you really know what's going to happen," she said angrily, and took Julius's hand. Then she started up the stairs, trying to block out the noise from below them. They spent the day trying to keep the other from thinking about the night. They finally gave up, and Julius just held her close, trying to burn every detail of her into his brain. He needed to remember the way her hair smelled and the curve of her back. They watched the clock, and it moved too quickly. The hour finally came for him to leave to get ready. He kissed her deeply and went to the door to open it. "Will you come back to escort me downstairs?" she asked quietly. He turned back to look at her sadly. "No, I will wait downstairs with everyone else." She nodded, understanding this was it for them. "I will always love you, Julia," she said. Now he turned his head slightly sideways, and he gave her a small smile. "No, you won't, Sawyer, but I will always love you." He then quickly walked out of the door and closed it. He couldn't look back, because he was afraid if he did, he would rush back in and take her far from here. Cassia came after he left and helped her to get ready. She refused to change her mind about wearing anything but black. She had already pulled out a dress for the solemn occasion. Cassia brushed her hair out while she sat in a robe, staring miserably into the mirror. They spoke little, but Sawyer was glad she was there. She didn't think she could have gotten through this alone. She reached up and clasped Cassia's hand and said thank you. Marcus sat with Julius as he packed his things and got ready. Julius would leave immediately after she sang. Marcus would leave with him if he wasn't her soulmate, and he prayed he wasn't. Cassia would see to his trunks, and if it happened to be Marcus, then Cassia would leave with Julius. Neither of them would let him be alone with his heartbreak. Julius was glad his brother sat with him now. He wasn't sure he could have done this alone. Her soulmate took one last look in the mirror before he left to go downstairs. As he descended the stairs, he had only the faintest hope he was the one. Minnie Fay had come, and Mother was amongst them. When she saw Sawyer's soulmate enter the ballroom, she smiled faintly. She remembered the young boy who had crawled into her lap all those years ago. He was now a grown man and looked very nervous. When she saw Sawyer walk in, her heart ached for her. She looked so sad and lost right now. Mother knew that soon enough she would forget the sadness and be in the arms of her perfect love. She watched her climb the stage in misery. A Fay sat at the piano, and another sat on a stool with a guitar. No one knew what song Sawyer would sing. Not even Sawyer herself knew. According to Mother, the song would just come forth from her soul. The song would flow with its energy, and the other two Fay would feel the flow of its energy and would play the vibrations they felt. The two best musicians among the Fay had been chosen. When her song reached its peak, the ethereal cord would come forth from her soul and reach for his. This was as much as had been explained to her, and she did not know what would happen after that. She walked to the front of the stage and stood very still. The crowd stood silently staring at her, and she knew she should say something, but she didn't trust herself to speak. You could hear a pin drop. Her soulmate stared back at her and was astounded by her beauty. She had worn black with the intention of looking miserable. Instead, it only enhanced her beauty, and she stood before him like a dream. She smelt a small vibration begin in her feet and knew the moon must be at its peak. The vibration began to intensify, and she searched the crowd in panic to find Julius's face. If she could just focus on his face, maybe she could stop this. She wasn't ready. The guitar began to softly play behind her, and then the piano began a soft, soulful melody of just one note. She needed to see his face, because she felt the song welling up inside of her now. She found him and locked eyes just as the song started to come from inside her. It was a sad song that sprung forth from her. Instead of singing about hope, it was about hopelessness. It was about the loss of love and about the pain she felt about losing love. It was tragically sad, and it was beautiful. Sawyer had the Fae in tears. She looked so beautiful in her sadness as her soul song made its way out. Sawyer took no notice when the ethereal cord sprung forth from her chest. She was lost in her own sorrow. Mother watched in awe, though, as the two souls were about to connect. Sawyer's song had mesmerized the whole room, and it was like no one could take their eyes off of her. The crowd saw her ethereal cord and watched breathlessly to see what would happen as she continued to sing. Sawyer sang about having found no peace. It was then that it began to twist out from her into the open area in front of the crowd. Slowly, another ethereal cord came from inside the crowd and twisted toward hers. No one could move their eyes from her to see who it was coming from, though. As her song reached its height, the two cords swirled around each other and finally touched and connected. She kept singing, but it stepped down from the stage as she felt it pulling her forward. He made his way forward through the crowd as if in a trance. They both made their way to the open center of the floor and faced each other. She finished singing, but the piano kept playing the same tune. They stood just inches apart, not touching or speaking. Their cords became one and wrapped around them both, swirling in and out. They both held up their left hand at the exact same time, and without touching them, faced them towards one another's palm. The cord then swirled around both their hands faster and faster until it became a blur. When it finally stopped, they both had on matching silver rings on their fingers, made from an endless infinity design. When the cord absorbed back into them both, the piano finally faded, and she looked into her soulmate's eyes and felt the perfect love she had been promised. She smiled up at him, her heartbreak completely forgotten. "So you are my soulmate," he said, and smiled at her. "Since the day I was born, Julius," she said, and kissed him. The other three men were slightly disappointed. Each of them had held out hope it might be them, and had imagined what it might be like for her to love them. Each of them had also feared it a little bit since she announced she loved Julius. Their disappointment quickly faded, though. Mother approached the two of them and spoke. "I could not tell you the truth even as you struggled. You fell in love as I had hoped, and that was my purpose in bringing him here. I did not want you to connect to a stranger, but I had no idea the intensity of your love. Tomorrow we will have a soul ceremony for you both, but tonight rejoice in each other's love." She then hugged them both, remembering them both as the children she had known them as. Everyone quickly came to congratulate them both and clapped Julius on the back. Sawyer and Julius never let go of one another that night. They had come too close to losing one another. They knew they would never face that fear again. The Fae came early in the morning to get everyone ready. Today was the day the Fae had long awaited. The soul ceremony was a sacred thing. Sawyer's long-awaited destiny could be complete. With them they brought white linen cloth and gold. They buzzed about each guest and fashioned outfits for each of them. Sawyer and Julius's had enchantments added to each stitch and button. Flowers were woven throughout every woman's hair, and the girls felt like fae themselves. While they prepared everyone in the human realm, Mother prepared the fae realm, and was busy moving trees and earth. The men were taken to the fae realm early. Finally, the fae stood back and decided Sawyer was ready to their satisfaction. The girls came to join her when they were ready, and she looked at all of them. "You all look so beautiful," Sawyer exclaimed. All three of them wore white linen dresses. While all the dresses looked different, they all matched. She saw the fae had strung flowers in their hair and woven gold into their dresses. They looked like a trio of nymphs, complete with bare feet. "Sawyer, I don't think you realize how gorgeous you look. Julius will be stunned," Cassia said, in shock, seeing Sawyer. She didn't think Sawyer could have been more beautiful. Sawyer turned to Luna. "Yes," she answered. "I have raised you these few years, and while I know you are now grown and have a soulmate, I want you to know I will always be here if you need me," Luna said, tearing up. Sawyer hugged her deeply. "Luna, you are my mother, and I will always need you. My children will know your name only as grandmother, as will their children. In my bloodline, that will be your name. I will never stop needing you." Luna led them all downstairs to the realm doorway and looked at all the beautiful girls. "Are you ready?" she asked them. They all nodded and stepped through the doorway. The sight that greeted them was amazing. Mother had grown the trees so they lined each of the side of the grassy meadow, and their branches grew together to form an arch above them. They were all weeping willows, so their branches drooped to make a natural backdrop. Tiny white flowers dotted the ground everywhere. The fae stood among them wearing all white, and the grass was lush beneath their feet. In front of them, Mother stood under an arch of roses, and next to her stood Julius. Her breath sucked from her body when she caught sight of him. His perfect face smiled at her, and she knew he would always be her anchor. He was wearing white linen pants and a long white tunic. The fae had threaded it with gold, and the toggle buttons were gold. Here stood her perfect love, the man who had been willing to let her go to save her. Julius stood with Mother on his left side, and Marcus on his right. He stopped moving and stood frozen when he saw her. She was wearing a long white linen dress that reflected the gold strands woven throughout it. Her long hair was down and loose. Tiny flowers adorned it throughout. She smiled at him with a radiance that matched his own. As she began to walk towards him, he knew she was his perfect love. The two fae began to play harps as she began to walk toward him. The walk was long, and their eyes remained locked the whole time. Cassia walked behind her as she had been chosen to stand beside her during the ceremony. Hunter and Brexley went to join Lucas and Liam in the crowd. When she finally reached him, a single tear fell down her cheek, and he reached up to gently wipe it away. He grabbed her hands into his, and they stood facing one another. In that moment, they felt like the only two people in the world. Mother began to speak, and the harp music faded into the background. "So long ago, I met this young man when he was just a boy. To understand the end of this story, you must know the beginning." Mother waved into existence her own memory, and they all watched, because not even Julius knew this story. They could see Mother walking through the forest. She had just come from Rome, and her spirit was broken. It had been filled with violence, all the violence men could imagine. In the marketplace, humans sold other humans as they would cattle. Children sat next to their parents as they begged for food. Animals felt whips across their backs so they would work faster. Women sold themselves for money, many not old enough to be called women yet. They waged wars so they could take what others would not give them. She had felt so heartsick and cried out to the earth to give her an answer. That's when she heard it. A little boy was crying, and the sound of it matched her own agony. He was lying on the ground at the base of a tree, and all around him were broken paintbrushes scattered everywhere. His clothes were streaked in paint as if someone had thrown it at him. Across his face was an angry red handprint. In his despair, he was lying there, wishing to die. Mother came to sit beside him and asked him softly, "Tell me, child, who has done this to you?" He rubbed his crying eyes and saw a beautiful old woman with the light reflecting off her hair. My mother, he answered sadly. She held out her arms for him to come sit in her lap. He had hesitated for a moment, but craved the love of a mother and climbed into her arms finally. She wrapped one arm around him as he sat and gently pushed the hair from his face. Julius, who had never been held by anyone but Cassia, sank into the warmth of the woman. He basked in it because he had never felt the comfort of a mother. Can you now tell me what happened? His tiny brown eyes looked up at her. I made Mother a pretty rock. I painted a picture of a bird because it is her favorite. She got very mad and made me show her where I kept my brushes. I'm not allowed to have anything, so I keep them here. Why aren't you supposed to have anything? Mother asked. I don't know, he shrugged his tiny shoulders. Marcus and Cassia get to have stuff, but my dad says I don't deserve anything because I'm no better than a dog, he said. What happened when your mother came here? She asked. She got mad and broke everything and hit me. She says everyone would be happy if I never come home. He started to cry again. But I know Cassia would be sad. Mother felt her heart break and called out to the earth for the answer. The earth did answer her that day, and she saw everything leading up to this day. She knew the answer was held by this boy. Child, what if I were to bring you someone who will love you so completely you would never know sadness again? She asked. I wouldn't believe you. My mother says I'm too horrible to ever be loved. Your mother lies. On this day I will take away your pain, and I will gift you with a hard heart. I will make sure no one can make you sad again. If you give me half of your soul, I will give you freedom from pain, child, Mother said. Will it hurt? Julius asked. Mother laughed softly. No, you won't feel a thing, and you won't remember. You will only know this again when your soul is reunited, and I stand before you both. Julius agreed, and Mother rocked him and sang him a fey lullaby. Even after he had fallen asleep, she continued to hold him. She knew a mother would never rock him, and she wanted his small body to know her peace. She then held a hand over his chest and began to sing again. An ancient language flowed through her lips, and soon a tiny silver light came forth and rested in her palm. It was this seed she planted in the Fey realm. Now today is the ending of that story, the story of Julius alone and unloved. Today is the beginning of a new story, the story of Julius and his soulmate Sawyer. This will be a story of hardships they must face together and overcome. This will also be the story of a love like none other, and it will be their never-ending tale. Walk slowly into this life together, because now that his soul is whole again, Julius will know real emotion. Walk slowly in this life together, because now that her soul is whole again, Sawyer will know real emotion. Sawyer holds the power of destruction in her, and now only Julius holds the power to temper it. You will be each other's savior more than once. Your rings have bound you for infinity. Your souls will never part again. With that, Mother finished their ceremony, and they kissed one another. They hurried through their guests because they were ready to be alone and start their lives together.